And so I think our kind of next evolution is to also make sure people know that jujitsu is not just self-defense. Like, you still need the striking, you still need the other stuff. These things in themselves aren't necessarily self-defense. You need these different elements. But unfortunately, the bystander effect tells us that, we want to think surely somebody else in here has a better idea for dealing with this or has a solution, and they're going to do it.
But 9 times out of 10, in that kind of situation, no one has a response.
Right. Go do something, and then other people will help and follow. And, if it's right, you get home safely would be what I would call right now at this point, then, great, you did something. And that's better than doing nothing and having the same response. You tried something, it didn't work, or you didn't try something and it still didn't
nothing happened.
So, right.
Yeah. So there was that situation.
But that goes back to watching the news too, right? So if there's somebody going around throwing gas in a building and lighting fires, like if I see somebody come into my building with a gas can, like I'm taking the fight to him and getting him out of that door, because I know how this goes down. It's kind of, for us in the US, it's nobody's going to hijack a plane with a box cutter. We know how that ends.
Yeah.
People are going to do something. So,
and well, I think people did do something on the other flight.
Yeah. The flight that we don't talk about as much because, it wasn't as big of an issue. But then I won't go down that rabbit hole. But anyway,
see, I kind of go there.
Do something.
we did it a little bit, okay. And then there was another. There are so many situations here. Because people feel that it's like out of the blue, but it's like there's a powder keg of stress here because of the situation with COVID
response, and I would think
stress and everything, right? And so, like, it's just been a powder keg of people just exploding. There was another situation where, a guy was on a train, and he had a knife in his bag. And again, it's another fire violence thing. So he literally spreads. See, now I just got confused between petrol and gasoline and petrol all over one of the cars. Sets it on fire, and he's kind of attacking people with a knife, and everyone's escaping from one of the cars to another car. They still try to do something by leaving the situation, which is still good, right? It's better to not be there
better than freezing. Yeah.
But they all got to safety, but there was still a threat that was still active.
Yeah.
So what would have been a good response in that kind of situation? I know this is your closed off in a box and it's moving.
I don't want to Monday night quarterback anything necessarily. But so it was. It was in cars and it was in a train. Okay. Oh, train cars. Got it. Yeah.
Cars, yes.
I mean, look, you can try. We talk about this all the time. We had on our transit system in Charlotte, we had a guy attacking people with a machete. Like, you can run like only as far as you can run, and then at some point you're faced with accept that blade coming at you or do something, anything. And so there's a little bit of like a moral and ethical decision making there too. I can maybe run and push people in the way and let them deal with it. And that, I mean, I hate to be like, if you need to do that, but like, it's just what it is sometimes. You're responsible for your own safety, and then hopefully maybe like child or spouse or somebody that you've, promised to protect. I'm not necessarily responsible for the people around me, but you may have taken that on. You may decide, morally, ethically, I don't think I could deal with pushing grandma in front of this knife wielding attacker and making my way further down the train car. And again, that's something to try to decide about yourself ahead of time rather than in the moment and decide, am I going to go do something, or am I going to let as many people else have to deal with it before I have to deal with it? So that's when we talk about that in family protection too. Okay, you know, if your job is to protect your family, that might mean going with them and getting them out of wherever you are. And then maybe
Yeah.
you go back in and go try to protect other people. And maybe that's a decision you make, and maybe it's not, or maybe you go deal with that person and you let your family get out and escape. And but that's a hard
It's hard. Yeah.
issue.
It is.
But it brings up, but those are the important conversations to have in terms of getting to a point where you can have an internal dialogue with yourself and decide, okay, what's my obligation? And then you still might not act the way you would expect, morally, ethically, whatever, in the moment, because it's such a hard switch to flip sometimes between like, I'm just going to sit in this little train and I'm going to a play or a performance or my kid's school or, you know, whatever it is. And now all of a sudden you're faced with, you know, lighter fluid, violence, knife, like, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's difficult. And so that kind of goes back to before the situation arises, even though that's like an infallible situation, kind of know what you're going to do before it happens.
Yeah.
Like, what are your options?
That mental training, I just taught a runner's safety seminar today. And it was a 45-minute seminar. So, I mean, we were going fast and I threw a lot of stuff at them and I was like, we can talk in depth about whatever you want, you know, after classes. And I talked about different things. I talked about running, but I also talked about like, okay, walking your dog. And I had 2 people come up to me after that class, like, what do you do if you're walking your dog? And I was like, well, you know, I've thought about this a lot. And like, you've got to drop that leash and defend yourself. Like, you can't try to hold on to your dog and fight off an attacker. That's a good way to ensure that, you know, you're going to have a bad day. But if you've never thought about dropping your leash and dropping that leash and defending yourself, it's going to be really hard to do in the moment. Under stress, we grip down on what we're holding. And especially because every single moment of every single walk you've ever taken your dog on, you've been making sure to hold that item. If you've never thought about it, you're going to have a really hard time letting it go to protect yourself. You probably won't. You'll probably hold on tighter.
Yeah, it becomes a conditioned response in that situation.
Right, right. Because that's all you've really ever thought about is not letting go of the leash.
Okay. So always
that mental training is important. Yeah.
Oh, he's whining.
he's got something to say about everything.
I have an opinion too.
I want to go for a walk.
I'll protect you. Don't worry. All right. So we're kind of continuing because I kind of went off on that tangent about.
All good.
So going back. So in your own personal training, how does strength training play a role, and what effect does it have on your skills?
Yeah, I started weightlifting maybe 6 or so years ago, and just kind of off and on. And I definitely, like, I never went into it wanting necessarily something out of it. It was kind of a peer pressure, like, oh, all my friends are doing this, like, let me see what it's about. But
positive peer pressure.
Positive. Sure. Some days, but anyway, the parallels, the parallels of being able to move something heavy is to also being able to like strike hard and understand the importance of alignment in your body are super critical. It doesn't mean you have to spend, 2 hours every day in a weight room. But like knowing how to throw some weight on a bar and press it and squat with it and bench press with it and deadlift it, understanding how your body moves, like, and how it's supposed to move, is super important for all the other stuff, and how to engage your core in non-core activities so that you understand how that translates into using your core to strike or do jujitsu or whatever it might be. It's got a lot of overlap that people probably don't see initially.
Okay. And kind of like kind of segueing off of that, because I use this to kind of connect. What can women do, or non-male folk do about the misconception of strength training in becoming manly or bulky or less
bulky
feminine?
Word. I feel like this. I hope this horse has been beaten to death. I'm going to continue to keep beating it, I guess. But
beat this horse.
Like, you have to work you have to work really, really, really hard to get bulky. I mean, I was weightlifting an hour a day every day and maybe kind of starting to bulk a little bit, but not to the point where people weren't like, whoa, you look manly. But I would have girls coming up to me like, oh my God, what do you do? I love your arms. And I'm like, I lift weights. In addition to a million other things. Like, I don't leave this like, oh, I do a little of this, little of that. But it's that weightlifting. But you have to work a lot. You would have to really be intentionally trying to bulk up, and even then it's really difficult. It's not an accidental thing. It's science. You need protein and carbs and the right diet and the right plan. It's not just like, oh, I accidentally walked into a weight room one day and boom, boom, boom. Just like you're not going to accidentally walk into the self-defense gym and like now you're a badass and you have G.I. Jane hair and whatever. G.I. Jane is probably a super old reference at this point. Hopefully your audience isn't too young, but yeah, whoops.
It's a little dated, but I get it. I remember watching it when I was a kid. So
right.
Maybe not for what would be like a good reference now? For like,
there's probably a cartoon somewhere. I don't know.
Oh, geez, we're like downgrading the cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Kids these days. Of course, by kids, I mean like 23, but that's fine.
So yeah, it's intentional. Like you're not gonna bulk. Like it's going to the gym.
Right. It's very intentional. You're not going to go to school and just accidentally be a neurophysicist. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a real thing, but you're not going to accidentally do it. Like you have to work really hard and do the right classes, the right courses. You can't just walk in and relay your class list and go for it. It's very intentional.
Yeah. So kind of like going off some of these questions. Now, do you have any recommendations? I'm pretty sure you read this question. You were like, I wonder if I should answer this. Any recommendations for menstruating folk who have to take time away from training, maybe due to cramps or other things that happen those times during the month? What can they do to continue to maintain their skills or to stay active during those times?
Yeah, I did read this question and I was like, am I going to answer that? And I was like, you know what? I would answer it. I know I would answer it off the cuff if you asked me. So I'm going to answer it not off the cuff. Oh man, now they know I had a chance to look at them. Believe me, I looked at them twice for about 10 seconds each, but that's okay. No, it's the same thing that anyone should do if they're having an off day, if they're not feeling up to it. Pushing yourself, learning to rest is super important, just across the board.
Yes.
Who you are, whatever, let's
emphasize that, please.
Yeah. And so just because it's a time of the month that's hard for you and has you run down, you don't have to push through it because that's what it is. It would be the same as having an injury or the same as just waking up and feeling off that morning. Maybe you decide like, okay, I'm going to go drill and I'm just not up for, I don't want any pressure on my body, my belly, whatever. So I'm not going to roll. So I'm just going to drill and whatever. But I think people tend to get in their head with things like this. But and a lot of things come down to this. Have a conversation with whoever you're training with. I mean, you don't have to go into like in-depth conversation with them. They're not your doctor, but just be like, hey, I'm having a little bit of trouble at that time of the month. My stomach kind of hurts. I just want to drill light or whatever it might be. And that's okay. You should definitely have conversations with training partners. That's what I would do if I had an injury. Like a couple of times recently, I've had something going on, shoulder or knee, and I touch hands and I'm like, hey, mostly it's, it's on me. I just want to let you know that my knee is kind of bugging me. So like I might tap to things that you don't realize or whatever. And they'll do a good job of, trying to avoid the injury too. And that's how you go through life as an adult. You communicate with the people that you're around. Not to simplify it, because it's not always easy. And again, I told you, I teach a lot of kids and you see the genesis of how hard it is to have those conversations, even at an early age. But you have to learn how to communicate with people before just losing your mind on them or whatever it might be.
Always a wonderful skill to develop. Have conversations. Something people don't do nowadays anymore.
No, it's very difficult. Yeah. It's crazy how many problems can be solved when you just talk to each other.
We've just solved the problem of everything in the world.
Pretty much everything. Yep. You heard it here first.
Just talk it out. Or we can just have the presidents from every country just fight each other instead of having. Never mind. Let me not. I'll cut that section out. My brain kind of takes me on one tangent.
Yeah, and then
I'll get myself into trouble. All right. I think we've already talked about the soft skills, so we can kind of get past that one. So, but we mentioned soft skills a little bit. And like, are there really any differences between the soft skills that a man would utilize versus how a woman would utilize those same soft skills?
Yes.
Oh, there was no, it depends. There was a definitive answer for this one. All right, let's go.
It probably depends, but I'm giving you a bone. So no. So the thing the one area maybe that I would be like, yes, would be the altercations that non-males tend to find themselves in versus males. Typically, any kind of like preemptive type thing that could be maybe de-escalated and not lead to violence. When it's two males, it's non-females. I don't know what we're doing anymore. But anyway, two more masculine people, it tends to be more of a thing of ego versus woman or non-male to male. There's a more predator prey kind of mentality. And by, having confidence and setting boundaries and whatever it might be, being willing to hit first, that kind of thing, that's going to be a different conversation to have for me with a strange man approaching me on the street versus two guys at a bar kind of thing. And not that they'd always be different, but if we're going by odds, statistics, whatever you want to call it, the tendency is what it is.
Okay.
Where a guy should be like, oh man, I had no idea that was your girlfriend. I'm so sorry. Here, let me get you guys a couple beers and I'm going to leave this bar. Like, you're dropping the ego. Yep. You're the alpha. Here's your beer. Like, I'm getting out of there. And that resolves the problem. A female might have to be a little bit more assertive. Not that situation would happen necessarily, but I'm going to throw people off more by standing my ground and asking somebody to stay where they are and not get closer, and telling them if they get closer, that it's not going to go their way, whatever it might be, that's going to be taken differently than if a guy said that to another guy.
Yeah. Because of that predator prey mindset. It's like, what do you mean something's going to not go my way?
It's not exactly what I would say to somebody, but I wouldn't give them a warning. I would just tell them to stay back. And when they didn't listen, they would find out for themselves.
Like, these hands are rated E for everyone.
Hey, that is something I would say for sure.
Get a t-shirt made.
Yeah. We're big on t-shirts here.
These hands are rated E for everyone. You mentioned preemption. And when you're talking about soft skills and like difference between how male versus female use soft skills and preemption. Now, preemption can mean hitting first, or it can be other things. So can you talk a little bit about preemption?
So preemption could be everything from, I just don't park my car where I was going to because there was a stranger walking through the parking lot. We would more categorize that as like self-protection, doing things to avoid potentially harmful situations. But I think that would fall into self-protection, and preemption would fall together in that alignment. So that you don't have to get to and then like a power slap as a preemption, when I know violence is imminent and I'm not going to be able to get out of this situation, being able to hit first and get ahead of whatever that person was trying to do and shift that variable a little bit.
Okay. Nice. Preemption. I already did this one. We're actually kind of we're winding now. We only have a few more questions left. Oh no.
Ooh.
All right. I'm still wondering if I should ask that one about police training, but let's not cause too much issues. Let's not rock the boat too much.
It depends.
There it is.
So there you go.
There it is. So aside from punching people in the face and choking them out for a living, what do you do in your free time?
I'm a dog person, if you hadn't noticed. So I actually I foster for an organization and help them out with some things as well. So I usually have a pit bull that's a rotating door, I call it, of pit bulls that I'm fostering. So they take up a good amount of time.
You're doing good service to the world. Thank you so much. I love pit bulls.
Yeah, that's mostly the people I find, I come across. The ones who know pit bulls, they're like, I had no idea they're so sweet. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. So I enjoy doing that. And then I rock climb, bouldering specifically, because I just apparently like things that can hurt me, but it's it's nice when it's just me versus another non-moving object. That's really fun.
Yeah. Okay, I can only hurt myself here. Just make sure I do everything right.
If something happens, it's all on me. It has nothing to do with another person. That wall was where it was.
Never moved one bit. It didn't hit me in the face.
Knew nothing.
So dog person, rock climbing, staying in your pajamas like you mentioned earlier.
Staying in my I have pretty much two levels, like in my pajamas or moving out doing something.
Okay. All right. Here's the question. So, Ryan Hoover, it depends. How often do you hear him responding to questions with this? like how often? Is it like all the time, most of the time? Or is this like a main part of his like dialogue?
I'd be probably a steady, just like if I'd had to take a shot every time he said it depends, I'd just be like a steady state of drunk. Probably way past tipsy regularly, but not like way over the top. It's not every second.
Okay.
But it's kind of fun because I'll hear somebody ask a question and I'm like, oh, it depends. It's coming and coming in hard. Like that, it depends train is about to take you down. But it's like, listen, we all love to clown him for it, of course, but, and the creative ways, sometimes we can say it depends. But like anything, you just have to, you don't always, and I think people don't understand violence, so they don't understand specifically why he says it depends so much in his realm. But if you told a doctor like, hey, my blood pressure is high and I'm shaking, what's wrong with me? They wouldn't give you an answer. And if they do, you should not trust that doctor. They're probably wrong because they don't have enough information. There's so many other variables. So it depends. How old are you? What did you eat? What did you like? There's just so much there, that you have to continue to delve into, so that when somebody comes in, they think they're asking a complete question and they say, well, what do I do if I wake up and there's a stranger standing there and he has a gun to my head or whatever? And you're like, well, that's three variables of the 8 million. Like, I don't know. It depends on all these other things. So it's obviously very fun to clown him on, but it is regularly the response, with the caveat of, okay, here's what I think you mean, and the situation I think you're picturing. So here are some options. But this isn't just a plug and play game of, if this happens, you fix this. So.
Okay. So that was more than a joke question than anything, because like you said, he always just has a wonderful response right after he says it depends, because he breaks it down.
But it's so still fun to clown him.
He's like, he's gonna say it depends.
Yeah. Well, it's at the point too where some students will ask a question and they'll literally like finish and then say it depends. Like they really thought they had a good one, and then they finish and they're like, it depends. And he's like, yes, let me tell you why. So.
And he's like, good, that means you're learning.
Yeah. Well, he actually, we have kind of an internal joke where he grades questions. Like you ask something and he'll be like, that's a D question. And he might not even say it depends and just move on. Like that's when you know you didn't do a good job. He mostly does that with coaches and people he knows well, but yeah.
He gives you that look and he's just like,
you're like, ooh, F, done. Okay. Gonna come back, retake this course. We'll try again later.
Let me rephrase the question. I'll come back.
Yeah.
All right. So, um, where do you see Fit to Fight in the future?
Ooh, fit to fight in the future. Um, so, I mean, we want to reach as many people as possible. So you'll continue to see seminars and traveling, hopefully more overseas even too, as we all come out of the COVID funk, and
Yeah.
traveling gets to be a little bit more simpler and you know, direct. Um, yeah, our ultimate goal with some stuff is just to not be needed too, and it's really cool because we've seen wrestling infiltrate more schools as part of self-defense, jujitsu be more welcomed as part of self-defense, and so I think our kind of next evolution is to also make sure people know that jujitsu is not just self-defense. Like, you still need the striking, you still need the other stuff. These things
Yeah.
in themselves aren't necessarily self-defense. You need these different elements, and you can be a jujitsu school and teach a self-defense course, but if you just are on the ground the whole time, you've probably missed a lot of steps leading up to it, and you're just not being honest about what you're teaching. um,
Yeah.
so hopefully, this next segment of Fit to Fight and where we're going next brings more honesty and truth to self-defense.
Mm, okay. Now, if there's anyone interested in training with you, the Fit to Fight instructors, or even becoming a part of the network of the Republic, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, fit2fight.com has all our upcoming events, information about programs and contact pages. That pretty much all gets you to me. So you'll be able to find me. Fit2fightrepublic.com. We have a lot of online training and digital resources as well. It's important to get hands-on at some point, but if you don't have somewhere to train with, maybe you can find a friend and go through some training materials virtually as an option. And then, of course, social media at Fit to Fight Republic on most platforms.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I think that wraps up our interview with Amber Staklinski.
Nice.
Staklinski. Did I say it right this time? All right.
Thank you so
Thank you very
much.
much. Okay. And thank you for everyone that was watching and signing out.